The Dallas Mavericks. Geoff, we both expected the Mavericks to be really good this year, as most people did, but I'm not sure we expected it in the way that we've seen so far. Luka Doncic has missed 6 games, and without him, the Mavericks are 5-1, including wins against the Knicks, the Thunder, the Nuggets, the Hawks. So I don't think anybody would have seen that coming. The Mavericks have really thrived without Luka, and in large part, in my opinion, something I wanted to talk about was because of Kyrie Irving. Kyrie Irving has been a godsend for them, and I think this guy has not been properly appreciated as an elite player in this league and an all-time great. And really, I'm talking about myself included to some extent. Like, I just think people have routinely underrated how absurd he is in terms of what he can do on the ball as an engine, but also his versatility, his intelligence, his feel for the game, for how to consistently make an impact no matter what situation that he's in. And it's like we have to bring this back up every year. I feel like we've talked about this so much before, but if we just look at a quick look at his single number offensive impact seasons, according to estimated plus minus, from age 22 to age 33. So for the last decade, he has never been lower than 97th percentile in offensive impact, besides 1 year when he was 96th percentile offensive impact. And this is on teams where he was a secondary option to some of the greatest offensive players of all time in the history of basketball. This is LeBron James. This is Kevin Durant. This is Luka Doncic. And also where he was a primary option on a 55 win and a 49 win Boston Celtics team. And the guy can just flow in and out of those roles effortlessly and be a perfectly additive player or a dominant lead initiator. It's completely insane. And, now this year he's shooting 47% from 3 and it has a career high true shooting percentage. Like, it just makes it so easy to build a team because, like, the perfect team build for Luka Doncic, excellent, versatile defenders who are switchable, who we can talk about each of those guys, solid to elite shooters all around, either a spacing 5 or a hard rolling 5. That's also the perfect team build for Kyrie Irving too. So you have Luka go down and then you have Kyrie step into that role and they don't miss a beat. Kyrie has to go down, in my opinion, as one of the most underrated players of all time in terms of his offensive versatility and his additive impact. I just think this is incredible what he's been able to do. And he's not the only reason for the Mavericks' amazing start and ability to perform well without Luka, but he's a huge part of it.
His malleability is definitely underrated. And I think a big part of it is because when you think of versatile, malleable players, you don't think of small ball dominant guards. When you think of Kyrie Irving, you think about the handle. That's the first thing everyone thinks of. He's Uncle Drew. He's got, he's God with the ball in his hands. He can dribble through he's like the Lionel Messi of basketball players. He could dribble through anything. And so you just don't think of those guys as, oh yeah, well, you could just put him next to a star. You immediately, if you're, analytically inclined like we are, and you think about synergy the way we do, your first thought is, oh, well, you're sticking 2 ball dominant players next to each other. One of them is going to have to take a step back. And we have enough. There's no hypothesis. There's no guessing. When you have a 10-year sample where a guy plays on 4 different teams and his offensive impact is exactly the same and it is peak offensive impact no matter where he goes, it doesn't matter what your preconceived notions about what he should look like or what should happen to his impact in certain situations. That goes out the window. You have to start adjusting how you're analyzing the player. You're wrong. If you think that he is a diminishing returns type player, you're wrong. He's not. He is a perfectly additive offensive player. He has proven that. He can fit as the second option. He will make it work. Or, like you said, if a Luka Doncic goes down, he can just scale up and be an elite first option. That is what you have when you have Kyrie Irving on your team. And I think it comes down to his overall skill. We sometimes are dismissive and scoff at analysis like that. Oh, he's not a better scorer, but is he a more skilled scorer? And Kyrie is kind of the poster for that. Sometimes people can seemingly get carried away with analyzing his ability because they love his skill. They love what he can do with the ball. They love what he can do with both hands. But I actually think in this case, his skill helps his additive ability because he can literally score from anywhere. So no matter where you ask him to be on the court, no matter what you ask his role to be, he has the dexterity and the skill to make it work, to just be like, oh, I'll just get to the basket more and I can finish with both hands and I can do anything off the backboard, any spin, any hand, any angle you want me to, I'll put it in the basket. Oh, you want me to attack pick and rolls from the mid-range? I'll be an above-average mid-range shooter. Now he's a 46% three-point shooter playing off of Luka Doncic. He can do anything. This guy is legitimately, pound for pound, size-wise, one of the most skilled players in the history of the league. I think a lot of people knew that. Maybe you and I overlooked that. But what the data is telling us now is that not only is he skilled in a way that people can see, but the data is reflecting how he is putting his skill to use in a team first way that is helping the team and impact winning in an extremely positive way and in a way that lets the Mavericks, and we're going to talk about this more because you brought up the role players. When you have a guy as malleable as Kyrie Irving is, as versatile as Kyrie Irving is, you have the world is your oyster in terms of team builds around him. You don't have to specifically put these certain types of role players around him. You're not hindered in any way from a team building aspect. This guy opens up doors that just weren't open to the team before. And if you had asked me 2 years ago, what are the Mavericks going to do? I would have joked that what they were going to do is lose Luka Doncic. I didn't think they had a path forward to building a contender around him because they were so screwed. They trade for Kyrie Irving in what seemed as a last-ditch effort to keep Luka interested in being on this team. Barely 2 years later, I'm going to talk about this in 5, 10, 15 minutes. I think you could make an argument that no team in the NBA has the combination of high-powered skill that they have and depth that the Mavericks have. That's what getting Kyrie Irving has done for this team in a short period of time.
It's beautifully said, and it's funny because a deal that a lot of people looked at, including myself, skeptically, getting Kyrie Irving and like, well, that locks them into Kyrie, and where are they going to go? And if they don't work together, then they're screwed, and there's nothing they can do. A deal that looked like it locked them into some kind of potential negative outcome has actually been the godsend for them and has made them this team that, like you said, has a elite depth and elite high-end talent. And they can sustain any number of injuries potentially. As long as one of Luka or Kyrie is there, they're still going to be good at all times. It's unbelievable. And to your point, it's funny because Kyrie makes all of these like kind of basketball isms, these like sayings that sound kind of silly to more like analytically inclined people like you and I. He makes them also like kind of true, like where you say like, well, Kyrie just knows what the team needs and he's able to do that. It's like, he does. He kind of just knows what the team needs and he's able to fill that role. And it's like, that sounds silly, but he actually does it. And I think it's just, honestly, I think a lot of it is just his basketball intelligence and just kind of having that elite feel. And that probably does come with that developing and acquiring that level of skill and being around the game so extensively. I think a lot of that is where it comes from. But either way, we know, like you said perfectly from the data, if you think that Kyrie, based on how he plays, is not a highly additive player, just based on aesthetically, you think that this type of player won't be that, you're just wrong. He just is. And that's a fact at this point. That's an objectively kind of, we have empirical evidence about it, and he is. And we talked about we both like kind of flagged their role players, and, there's tons of them, so we could talk about all of them. I'm going to talk about Quentin Grimes, who is just, obviously the toast of the town right now, coming off the games that the performances that he's had in Dallas. And, I just think that it's so strange to see someone who, in Quentin Grimes, who leads the team in on-off. No, it's not Kyrie. No, it's not Luka. It's Quentin Grimes with a plus 15.3 on-off, according to Cleaning the Glass, meaning that the Mavericks are an insane 15 points better when he's on the court than when he's off the court. And this is not like a Christian Brown sharing the court with Nikola Jokic all the time. This is, no matter who he plays with, Quentin Grimes ends up helping the Mavericks be a really positive team, whether he's playing with Kyrie, whether he's playing with Luka, whether he's on the court without either of them. And is a player I've personally been extremely high on his upside because of his ability to kind of flawlessly be additive to any lineup you could possibly put him in. And currently, by a bunch of the data, grades on B-Ball indexed, and you and I had talked about this a little bit before we jumped on the pod, one of the best screen navigators in the entire league, one of the best isolation defenders in the entire league. You stick him on an opposing guard, they're just going to struggle to get a good shot, either in isolation or on pick and rolls, which leads to later shot clock attempts, which are less efficient. And Grimes is able to do that. And obviously, that's just the defensive end. From off the three, he's shooting 40% on the catch so far, which is something we know he can do. 48% on wide open three so far, which is, really insane and probably not going to last, but important for him, in my opinion, just as somebody who's watched a bunch of Knicks games. Obviously, you and I have both. When Quentin Grimes was on the Knicks, he's shooting 46% on above the break threes. He's always been a lethal corner shooter, but has struggled at times above the break. And now he's starting to make those shots and seeming comfortable from that range, which makes his opportunities to impact the game almost endless because he can do it almost anything you do, whether it's attacking closeouts, which he's pretty good at, and making plays out of those closeouts, out of those attacking of closeouts, whether it's catching and shooting above the break or in the corner, whether it's playing on or off ball defense, whether it's navigating screens. The guy can literally do everything at a high level and impact the game. And the Mavericks have him, and they have a bunch of guys who can do stuff like this, which makes them so scary moving forward, especially when they get everything working on all cylinders and everyone's healthy.
Yeah, absolutely. And you brought up a number of the good data points about Grimes that I had marked down, which is, we're so in sync all the time. But one of the things you didn't say, which I want to pay tribute to, when you think of Grimes, if you're a Knicks fan or you're just a basketball fan who watched him in New York, you think of a purely 3-and-D player, and I think that that's fair. I don't think that he has, despite being a point guard in college, I don't think that he has a super high ceiling as like this secondary initiator. I don't know how much more meat is on the bone. But in Dallas so far this season, he is doing things. There are some indicators there that show some expansion in his game. He's getting to the rim more. He's shooting more mid-range attempts, and he's shooting them better than he ever has. Still not great, but he's shooting them better than he ever has. He's less assisted on these attempts. I think when you put all this stuff together, look, he's getting fouled over double the amount he's ever been fouled in his entire career. That's not like luck based. It's not like he's getting fouled on 3-pointers. This is a guy who's making an effort to attack closeouts in a way that I don't think he ever has in his career. And I think he's being incentivized to do so. Also, his overall defensive impact is way higher than it's ever been. So he has been given a little bit of a stage here with some injuries, and he's taking the baton and running with it.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with all that. I think that's really well put in. It's really incredible what the Mavs have just been able to do as a team. And like you mentioned earlier on in the pod, like the depth that they have. Guys like Spencer Dinwiddie, who I have not been a fan of throughout his career, like somehow making every big play all the time. PJ Washington, who I'm like angry at because I had hyped him up back in his Charlotte days and been like, this guy's going to be really good. He's very switchable. He makes threes. He can play center. He can be your stretch big. He can do all these things. And then he did not perform to that level moving forward. Now he is. Now he's doing those things. He makes threes. It feels like he hits every important 3-point shot that the Mavs have almost every night, including going back to the playoffs last year. Derek Lively, who's been
especially from the corners,
it's like if the guy has a corner three of any significance, he makes it every time. It's bizarre. Obviously Derek Lively, I mean, you can talk about him if you want, and their bigs. Gafford, I think, has sort of underperformed a little bit so far this season, but only on the defensive end. I think he's been really good offensively. So they just have guys to throw at you right and left. And I didn't even mention Najee Marshall. There's just like too many guys to talk about. So
their 9-man rotation when healthy, if they put Grimes in the starting lineup, I'm sure some Mavericks fans will scoff at that. Like, we just gave Klay Thompson all this money, but my ideal 9-man rotation for the Mavericks would be Kyrie, Grimes, Luka, PJ Washington, Lively, with Dinwiddie, Clay, Najee Marshall, and Gafford off the bench. That's an insane 9-man rotation. There are no negative players. With Dinwiddie playing how he is now, I would have said Dinwiddie is a negative player, a couple weeks ago. But look, I want to give Dinwiddie some props. He's a much better defender than I ever thought he was. And maybe he's just trying harder. Maybe Kid is known as someone who can get the most out of you defensively. That's what he's done in Dallas. He's coached some really good defenses. Maybe he's helped him a little bit. But I hate Kid's over reliance on initiators. That's like my biggest pet peeve with him. I don't know if Mavericks fans share that sentiment with me, but he'll have these lineups where it's like Kyrie, Jaden Hardy, and Dinwiddie with Grimes on the bench or Najee Marshall on the bench. And it's like, dude, that is just completely redundant. That is the opposite of what we were just talking about with this great synergy. You don't need all these guys. Like Jaden Hardy shouldn't even be playing. So it is ingrained in me to like not root for Dinwiddie to fail, but everybody wants to be proven right on some level. And so I'm just waiting for Dinwiddie to be like, oh yeah, why is he out there? They should have more shooting or more defense. And look, I try to be as open-minded and unbiased as I can. Dinwiddie just keeps proving me wrong. And it's just like, he actually is sort of additive out there. He's helping defensively. He's a willing shooter off the catch. He doesn't only need to shoot pull-up threes. So that's a nice thing. And if that's your 9th man, a veteran, try-hard Spencer Dinwiddie, with all the shooting, all the defense, all the rim protection they have, both Gafford and Lively, more so Lively than Gafford, but I think they both are extremely switchable. PJ Washington switchable. They can switch almost across the board, and then you have two singularly dominant, amazing offensive forces in Kyrie Irving and Luka Doncic. We said before the season, and I think we were both in agreement, we thought this team would be better than the team that made the finals last year, but our point was about the variance of season-to-season variance. We were like, they could be better than they were last season and just get unlucky and lose in the first round. Like, that is a very real possibility for them. I don't know how much more I need to see before I say it would be a massive disappointment if they lost in the first round with this team if they're healthy.
I think we've seen enough. I've seen enough to say that. So I could be jumping the gun on a small sample, but everything works so effortlessly. I think we should close out with, we talked about Luka Doncic only in passing. We've been hyping up the rest of the Mavericks, who have all been excellent. We just talked about Luka Doncic basically to say the Mavericks have been amazing without him. And this is like one of the best offensive players of all time that we know he's going to go down in history as that. So I know you had some thoughts you wanted to share about Luka Doncic, and maybe we could close out with those thoughts.
Yeah, I think you're going to find this a little controversial. And it's funny because I made a controversial stance last year about Luka, and you were on the other side of it. And I think you were right. I think you and all the people who criticized me were right. I think I was being a little bit too reactionary and just a little short-sighted in my analysis. I'm now going completely the other way, and I think you're just going to be like, whoa, you're going to have to reel me in again. So Luka has been an MVP level player for like 5 seasons now, pretty much since the bubble. He's been incredible from an output and impact standpoint, especially offensively. He's been amazing. I think you could make the argument that since Luka has made the leap to being an MVP level player, his time on the court in these first 20 or whatever games, I know it's only been 14 or 15 or whatever for him, but his time on the court has been probably the worst of his career. Like, some of that is just due to shot variance. His mid-range and three-point percentages are down. But if you just look at, catch-all impact data, EPM, BPM, etc., none of them are nearly as high on him right now as they've been on him the last couple of years. And I was looking into that, and I was like, okay, there's probably, again, some luck-based factors going into this, and these things will normalize, and Luka will be Luka. But one thing that jumped out to me, it just stuck out like a sore thumb to me. His overall percentage of assisted baskets is up to 35%. And now that might not seem meaningful to some people, but if you're a Mavericks fan and you've watched Luka, you probably know that is meaningful high, but maybe you don't even know how meaningfully high that is. Last season, it was 22%. And last season's assisted baskets was the highest of his entire career since he's become an MVP player, MVP level player. The few seasons before that were all in the teens. He's basically never assisted. He self-creates everything. My hypothesis right now is that Luka is, for the better of the team, trying to, in his own way, trying to find some semblance of a middle ground and be a slightly more additive player to a guy like Kyrie Irving. He's shooting off the catch more. How many times have you Mavericks fans seen Luka, the random times he's operating as a spacer, get the ball on the catch and frustratingly pump fake so that he can shoot a step back instead? He loves doing that. Everyone can picture in their minds the pump fake, and then he dribbles to his left because he loves gathering from his left hand. He is actually shooting off the catch more. He's doing it. I've seen it. I've seen it with my own two eyes. He did it in the Portland game when Kyrie Irving didn't even play. I think there's a chance, I'm not expressing a certainty here, but I think there's a chance that Luka is evolving as a player, and he's realizing that it is possible that a slight reduction in his individual output and in his individual impact could have net gains for the team stylistically, because it could empower other players to elevate their individual impacts.
Yeah, it's a great spot by you in terms of noticing that trend in the data. Not something I would have really noticed so early in the season, but it is significant when you're talking about what you said, 30, you said 35% of his shots are assisted. That's crazy for Luka Doncic. That's like that is like an outlier. That's complete outlier level. So definitely something I will be monitoring as things go on, and it will be interesting to see what happens to the team. Like, would the team get better if Luka did that? If he took a kind of a step back and was more willing to play off ball a little bit more? I mean, obviously we know Kyrie can do whatever. He can do off ball. He can be on ball. He can attack closeouts. He can initiate the offense. All of those kinds of things, but I'm not sure that I would love it if Luka was taking a step back for Spencer Dinwiddie to initiate offense more. Like you said, I haven't been the biggest Spencer Dinwiddie fan, so I'm not sure how sustainable this is. It would be cool to see him continue to play this way, but his usage is really down so far as well this season. So I'm not really sure. I think there's a lot of trends that could be transpiring. It could be a thing that's meaningful. It could be a thing that's just like due to it being 15 games of Luka Doncic so far, but we'll definitely start to see it. And this is something that I think Mavericks fans should especially really monitor moving forward.
Yeah, and I just want to, just since we're closing out here, I don't think that Luka will ever turn into this like fully additive player. I think that was the thing that you really like opened my eyes to last season. It's just at the margins, it's just a little bit of give, a little bit of I'm going to help you in ways that you help me with Kyrie, specifically with Kyrie. Just like you have your hands on the ball a little bit more, you can dance a little bit more, and I'll be more willing to be assisted by you. I do think that there is a possibility that could raise their ceiling higher than if it was just purely 100% Helio Luka ball. Kyrie, you're this great malleable player. Please fit in next to me. I think it's possible that the former scenario has a higher ceiling than the latter.
I think it's a great point. I definitely could see that, and I will be genuinely super interested in tracking that moving forward, because we could see a different style, and if it's able to raise the Mavericks ceiling past what we currently think of it as, man, this could be maybe the best team in a really crowded Western Conference of stacked teams. So it'll be interesting to watch. But, I think that's pretty much it for us on the Mavs. If this is your first time here, please give us a subscription. And, we talk all 32 NBA teams. How many NBA teams are there? Why did I say 32? There are 32. No, there's 30.
There's 30. You're thinking of football?
I was thinking about football. Well, I must have heard somebody say all 32 teams like recently. I got to stop watching football. That's the thing. I just need to get that shit out of my head.
You do?
But
I agree.
We love the NBA here. So, why don't you give a like, subscription, drop a comment. We respond to every comment that people post. So until next time, for Geoff, I am XJ, and this has been Hot Hand Theory.